Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Lawrence Branch NAACP County Commissioner Candidate Forum. My name is Ursula Miner. I am president of the Lawrence Branch NAACP. I would like to thank the NAACP Political Action Committee for getting this all put together. The mission of the NAACP is to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights in order to eliminate race-based discrimination and ensure the health and well-being of all persons. The NAACP cannot make political endorsements, but we can encourage our members and the community to be informed voters. I would like to introduce our candidates. First, we have the District 2 candidates. All three are Democrats. Shannon Reed, you might wave or something. Sarah Talafero, and Nancy Thelman. Next, we have District 3. The first two are Democrats and the third is Republican. Karen Willey, Shannon Portillo, and Pam Mcdermott. Next, we will start with the questions. I will ask the questions by district so you will know who the candidate is that is running against. We'll start with question number 1. What do you see as the most important challenges facing the County Commission, and how would you address those challenges? This starts with District 2, Shannon Reed.
Thanks, Ursula. I appreciate NAACP for organizing this opportunity for more voter awareness and voter education. I want to begin this introduction by stating unequivocally that Black Lives Matter, and I stand in absolute solidarity with all those who are doing the work to revolutionize systems right before our eyes during this very distinct moment in time. I'm truly inspired by the movement's momentum, and I'm committed to doing my part by utilizing my privilege and my access for the purpose of uplifting the voices of Black, Indigenous, and Black, Indigenous people of color, whose lives we must protect. The reason that I'm running for county commissioner is because I wish to be an advocate for the voices of the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our community. And I believe that there are a few key issues that really need to be addressed with the county commission. One of those being representation and racial justice with that, and that our county commission should be more representative of the people who live here, should have non-white voices on the county commission, and should have a new perspective and a fresh perspective of people who are listening to the voices of Black and Indigenous and Brown communities, of poor communities, of people who have been underserved and historically marginalized in our community. I also believe that crisis management and long-term recovery is a huge issue that our county commission is facing right now with the pandemic. I do crisis work for a living at the Willey Domestic Violence Center. I've been there for over 7 years and have done volunteer work similar before then that really teaches me some good tools for really managing a crisis moving forward. And I also believe that our county has been asking for change for a long time, and I've been a part of that request of our county commission for change. And so now I'm ready to be a part of that by really impacting policy and budget decisions for our community.
Thank you. Next we have Sarah Talafero.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you. The most important challenges facing Douglas County right now are, first, economic instability and job losses. Second, increasing numbers of homeless families and individuals during an affordable housing crisis, coupled with growing and unmet community mental health needs. And third, a public health and safety crisis of unresolved racial inequities and injustices. These complex problems require healthy and collaborative community relationships with all organizations and groups who have something at stake. What I've witnessed instead is my county representative completely unable to hold herself accountable while pointing the finger and throwing shade at almost everyone else. My representative has made choices limiting almost all public input or deliberation on matters that have profound impacts on the people she represents. Now, overwhelming numbers of people who once trusted their county government now feel burned, feel that their trust has been eroded and in many cases is now non-existent. I have a different vision of how we go forward. First and foremost, the buck stops here. I know that to diagnose complex problems, I need to explore multiple interpretations, even ones I feel discomfort with, to come up with adaptive solutions. I work across factions to truly understand and include perspectives different from my own. I envision a way forward for our county that empowers and energizes the people who live here, and I acknowledge we will not get to a more whole and collaborative place unless the processes I foster are trustworthy. If I do my work in a way that reflects my values of compassion and trust and responsibility, then my legacy will not be mine at all. It will be the legacy of the people I represent. You will live in a more just and healthy and safe community because you played a role in making it so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nancy Thelman. Yeah, Nancy, I believe you're muted.
So sorry, I should know that by now. So Douglas County is increasingly feeling the local effects of an unmitigated global pandemic disaster. And as a longstanding county commissioner, I can see that every other county priority is now held hostage to this COVID-19 crisis, which has a tight grip on our physical, economic, and social well-being. So my three highest priorities are about the county's role in mitigating COVID-19 through its messaging, budgeting, and social services. The county must continue to speak in a unifying message that helps each citizen understand the crucial role they play to stop COVID-19 transmission. That when we protect others by social distancing, hand washing, and wearing masks, we protect ourselves. Some people are tired of hearing this and other people don't believe it, but the county has to work even harder with our partners to break through the divisiveness and disbelief and get that message through in no uncertain terms. It is the difference between months or years of suffering to come. County budgeting is more difficult now because of the economic calamity of COVID-19. When personal economies fail, the county budget feels it, and our ability to deliver high quality services is strained. Since the county no longer plans to proceed with the jail expansion, we will have $9 million in cash saved up that would have been spent on that project, and that money can now be seen as a cushion for these uncertain economic times to come. I have 12 years of budgeting experience, and I'm grateful for those years of experience now as we face these extraordinary times. And the public health disaster that we're in has laid bare the fact that people of color and marginalized populations feel the harm of COVID-19 more than others. But that disproportionate struggle has always been present. It's only now that we see that so clearly. So the county must have a laser sharp focus on racial and social equity as we go about allocating local, state, and federal dollars to our social service networks. I'm committed to that racial equity work, and I know the county is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is, what do you see as the most important challenges facing the County Commission, and how would you address those challenges? Now we will start with District 3. Karen Willey.
Thank you, President Miner, for having us here today. And I'm glad for the chance to talk about my vision for Douglas County. We can frame the immediate needs of the county around 3 topics: equity, economics, and environment. For equity, on the County Commission, I will get to guide reforms in our justice system, including reducing incarceration, and more than that, addressing bias in the upstream issues that lead to justice involvement, so the prevention piece, in housing, employment, education, transportation, food access, and health. The very first step includes increasing diversity of identity and lived experience, including around race, in county jobs and on county boards, so we have the voices we need to move forward. And having conversations about race throughout the community, both person to person, and calling for implicit bias training across the board for city, county, both universities, and partner organizations, so we're all acknowledging the same realities in our culture. For economics, we'll be leading during a recession when we still need to find funding for safety net services like housing, addiction treatment, and mental health. We need to reinvent an economy that is more diversified, more resilient, and more equitable than we had before COVID. We'll do that by taking a deep dive into the barriers facing new and growing businesses and focusing on technology and living wage job training with partners like the Bioscience Technology Business Center and Peasley Tech. For environment, we need to provide for wise development that gives us the live, work, play space for a growing population while protecting our few remaining native spaces because they hold the answers for our human health and our planet health. I will continue to lead the discussion on land use that balances the needs of growth with conservation, and I will continue to encourage practices that store carbon in our soils for the benefit of our climate future and the health of our food and farms. And for the first time, starting in January, the County Commission will be in charge of running a volunteer fire department for half of the county. I'm excited for all the work to get to work on all of these issues. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Portillo.
First of all, thank you so much for hosting this forum. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage today. I'd like to start this afternoon by saying Black Lives Matter. We're at an important moment where America is being asked to truly reckon with our past and make better choices for our future. Douglas County is not exempt from this moment. The 3 most important and intertwined challenges facing the County Commission are systemic racism, COVID-19, and housing justice. I've spent my entire adult life studying local governments and public organizations, focusing on how we can make more effective, equitable, and inclusive decisions. I look forward to serving my community as County Commissioner, focusing on 3 central values: accountability, community, and justice. All of these values apply to the challenges I've mentioned. We as a community must acknowledge the harm done by systemic racism. We must listen to and center the voices of folks who have traditionally been excluded from positions of political power in our community, including Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. We see this most acutely in our criminal justice system. We deserve better, and we can do better. As the Commission, we're also responsible for the well-being of every person in the community. The current pandemic has exposed and made worse the known health disparities across race and economic status. The current Commission will be responsible for investing immediate federal relief dollars, but it will take time for our community to recover from this pandemic. We must ensure that we have strong support systems for our community's most vulnerable. Housing justice will be an important part of our recovery. We know we have an affordable housing crisis in Douglas County. We must think through how we approach housing justice as a county. Regardless of the challenge, I'll bring my 15+ years of experience studying and training local government practitioners and how we bring to bear values of accountability, community, and justice. I'll always focus on these values in decision-making, and I'll push to ensure that we have more representative boards and commissions throughout our county.
Thank you. Next, we have Pam Mcdermott.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for hosting this. And the more of these that I do, the more clarified my thoughts become too. So when I looked at this question, the thing I thought about was two things really came to mind. Just everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think our local government officials have work to do in rebuilding trust with people. And I'd like to be a part of that. You know, we elect officials to represent us, I think, and serve the common good. And in being part of the work of Justice Matters for the last 5 years and encouraging others in our church community to be a part of that as well and making that a priority there. I've just been shocked at times by the dismissiveness of some of the county commissioners towards citizens who've taken the time, this is not their job, but taking the time to go into the community and listen to people, to make a priority, to hear their stories and research how other communities that are facing some of the same things that we face, like jail overcrowding, are handling those. So I feel like we've lost 5 years, and time's a valuable resource. And we've lost 5 years of potential progress because, we had people who had a different agenda. And we've spent, they've spent about $1 million of taxpayer money just pushing something forward that could have been a really unifying thing in our community, because every precinct voted against that jail expansion. So I think transparency is essential for accountability and for keeping people educated about what's going on in their community. Also, I think that building a comprehensive, actionable, consensus-based community plan for Douglas County that calls everyone to work together for the common good is something we should prioritize. We have a lot of diversity. I love that about Douglas County, but we need some unity and to propel things forward. And that happens from the inside out through agreement, and takes intentionality and honest conversations. So I'm looking forward to, win-wins are possible when we work together and all know the plan.
Pam, I didn't want to interrupt you, but there is something on your screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh.
We could see part of you, but I didn't want to, I was going to let you go ahead and finish your speech. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Next, we're going to question number 2. What are your thoughts on driving business growth in Douglas County, and how would you encourage minority business growth? We're starting with District 3. Pam Mcdermott.
Okay, I didn't even mute myself yet, so yay for me here. My first thought is that we really have to make it a priority to drive business growth and create jobs. If we're not growing, then we're dying. So I've been just meeting and talking with a lot of people in the last month that I've been doing this. I had this thought, like, is Lawrence even attractive to business owners right now? And I think I'm not a business person, but I have been listening to business people talk about being business owners in our county. So I think that we, perhaps operate with this presumption and a mindset that, of course, people want to live here and set up businesses here, and that nothing will ever change that. That we'll always be able to count on that. And I think that that's something we have to really think about. We have a lot of vacancies in downtown Lawrence on Mass Street, and it doesn't look like it did 5 years ago. So, there seems to be a lot of questions, and people that are doing this, in the business world, that they don't understand why things like that South Lawrence expansion, things that have been worked on for many years, and there's been money put into it. Like, what's the path for yes to seeing things built? So another thought I just had was that, we have a lot of resources here, but are they easy for people to find? One thing I really love about business people and entrepreneurial people is that nothing really stops them, and they thrive on the energy of like-minded people. And so they're creative, work hard, willing to risk, and love being around people like that. We have a lot of great resources in our community, Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Portillo.
Here again, we must consider how systemic racism has shaped our community. People of color typically don't have access to the intergenerational wealth that many white families have. This can create barriers to starting and maintaining a business, particularly in an economic downturn. We've already heard countless stories and reports that indicate that entrepreneurs of color were less likely to receive PPP funds and other business relief dollars from the CARES Act. This is in part attributed to the fact that businesses owned by people of color tend to be sole proprietorships and are less likely to have pre-existing relationships with banks. The city of Asheville has just passed a unique ordinance to address these issues and uses a reparations framework to provide targeted funding for Black-owned businesses. In talking with Pentelo and Flores, a local farmer, he mentioned that the significant capital it takes to run a farming operation locally. What can we do as a commission to work on land acquisition, particularly for farmers of color? I think ultimately we must work with our local municipalities and chambers of commerce to look into what types of programs we can develop to specifically target economic development in communities of color by entrepreneurs of color. As Pam mentioned, we have a lot of wonderful things about our community that we need to consider, but we also need to consider the systemic ways in which entrepreneurs of color have traditionally been excluded from developing businesses and what policy solutions we as a commission can come forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Karen Willey.
So I have a heart for small business and growing businesses because I've done that. And also I've had chances to mentor other businesses. And there are three things that a new business needs, which can help any entrepreneur, but can be especially have a great impact on minority-owned businesses because of historic barriers. And those are access to startup funding, access to formal banking, and community connections. I led a group called Slow Money for a while that connected businesses with person-to-person loans with strangers from projects that weren't quite ready to interest a traditional bank. For one project, I was able to find private lenders for 3 separate women in Kansas City with refugee status from Burma so that they could grow their farm businesses. I think the power of community people to partner together with businesses is untapped and is a win for everybody. Access to formal banking is the next step. It can be a gateway to growth, but not having it can be a significant barrier. In the pandemic, we saw nationally that people of color were less likely to have strong connections with a local bank and took longer to get signed up with the Paycheck Protection Program loans. Our local Small Business Development Center, funded in part by the county, can help business owners apply for traditional lending with attention to increasing diversity. And community connections. I just joined the board for Leadership Lawrence through the Chamber of Commerce, which is a program that connects emerging leaders with mentors, peers, and customers. Through discussions, the discussions of race and equity are interwoven in the program, and in selecting applicants, we can do more. And the Chamber is forming a new diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to target the specific needs of women and minority-owned businesses. During the pandemic, I was able to work with 2 of my friends, women of color, who experienced setbacks with the shutdown. For one, it was connecting her to funding opportunities, and the other was helping her reach out to existing customers to keep them engaged with her work.
Thank you. The question is, what are your thoughts on driving business growth in Douglas County, and how would that encourage minority business growth? District 2, we'll start with Nancy Thelman.
So what drives business growth now in Douglas County is less about major manufacturing and more about encouraging small business startups and expansions, because we know that's where most of the new jobs are grown. So to drive business growth, I think there's a very practical thing we can do, and I have done it by bringing in Network Kansas's e-community program to Douglas County. It's part of the Department of Commerce's effort to bring money to start up businesses across the state. Particularly, Network Kansas has 3 programs that are aimed at setting aside gap funding dollars, particularly for women and for minority-owned businesses. Those programs are called the Women and Minority-Owned Multiplier Program, Startup Kansas, and the Metropolitan E-Community. All of them are aimed at supplying gap funding for business startups, particularly those who might be bypassed for loan funding from traditional lenders due to race or gender or lack of experience in business. So that gap funding I'm talking about is anywhere from $10,000 to $250,000 of funding for these business startups, aimed at women, aimed at people of color, and I'm happy to provide more information about that at a later date. But also workforce training is especially key. For business growth, we need folks who have the job skills that can meet the markets that exist now after COVID. So I'm really proud to be on the board of Peaslee Tech and their effort with Rise Douglas County to provide full scholarships for folks, particularly people of color and folks on the marginalized populations, for free full tuition for job retraining as a result of their loss of employment through the COVID situation. So workforce training is another important part of our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Sarah Talafero.
To encourage minority business growth, simply support current minority businesses and remove barriers to starting new ones. A quick example of supporting minority businesses, Experience Lawrence this past week promoted 10 local Black musicians on social media. So just kind of got the word out and got those faces out into the public. Encouraging small businesses and removing barriers to their success would in effect be supporting Black businesses, since most minority-owned businesses are local and small. And as you've just heard from other candidates, we do have a lot of good work that's already going on in those arenas. I would say also buy local wherever possible. And I'm curious to have conversations with a number of community partners to see if there could be some additional endowment or something set aside, especially for small minority business startups. Education is a major part of Douglas County, and with the presence of Haskell Indian Nations University, the University of Kansas, Baker University, and I see my time is already coming short. I would just also like to add my voice to the shout out to Peaslee Tech for creating the public entity partnership and for the work that they've done to bring economic development by creating living wage jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Reed.
Thanks. I think now is the time to live our community's proudly expressed progressive values, in part by investing in more creative and collaborative approaches to build a more truly diverse landscape of local small businesses. I think that is a point of pride in our community, that we have a lot of really great small local businesses that feed us, that clothe us, that provide all kinds of support and product to the community. And I think that there's a real opportunity to expand on that, and that we need to focus on lowering barriers and increasing access, especially for folks of color, to become the entrepreneurs and producers for our local economy that they want to be. I think that we have to offer more resource support and capacity support wherever possible to make that possible, to make that a feasible reality for more minority folks and historically disenfranchised folks in our community who don't have access to the types of traditional lending structures and private banks that most white folks and white business owners do. I want to bring community voices together to dream of ways that county leaders can help drive more sustainable economic growth through the community. And I know that we have to do so through a lens of racial and economic equality. I think that all policy, budget, and partnership decisions that I'm a part of making as a commissioner should be centered on the voices of the most marginalized people who live here and who want to build sustainable and healthy work to support their families. Those folks deserve to be invested in, and they deserve to have more opportunities for building generational wealth. And I think that the county has an opportunity to do that as a form of reparations.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to question 3. How would you balance the rural needs of Douglas County with the urban needs? We'll start with District 2, Sarah Talafero.
A decade ago or so, Douglas County outside of Lawrence city limits often used to feel ignored, and my perception is rightfully so. County officials have made a positive change in those relationships outside of Lawrence over the last decade. Yet Douglas County is unique because it is one of only 7 counties of the 105 in Kansas that has an urban center. So the new shift needs to be toward managing to also better serve the 80% of Douglas County residents who live inside Lawrence city limits. A more connected, collaborative, and holistic approach is needed. Land use and policies enacted within the cities in Douglas County have impacts on land use outside city limits and vice versa. For example, limiting annexation of current city boundaries can lower the infrastructure cost burden to taxpayers, but can impact land valuation and costs, which will have impacts on housing affordability, or it can. But the answer is not as simple as allowing unregulated growth and letting the market drive development. Economic development in the coming decades must be held to a strong standard to ensure high sustainability of projects, low environmental impact, and clear community benefits. This really requires all eyes and all minds involved in the deliberations. Douglas County officials need to continue to support for businesses that want to locate in Douglas County while ensuring that the jobs offer good wages and are good community partners and stewards of our rich historic and natural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Reed.
So when I think about rural and urban needs, I do not believe that they exist opposite of each other. And the notion that of that binary existing doesn't really account for the shared lack of access and support felt by so many folks who live in both landscapes. So when I think about underserved communities, many rural communities are underserved in a lot of the same ways that many urban neighborhoods and populations are underserved. Some of those issues that they face are housing access, affordable housing options, food security, justice access, public health safety, economic stability, consistent access to mental health and social services that they can get to and that are available to them no matter where they live. And so I'm really interested in investing time and energy into addressing those needs for all underserved populations. I think that our county commission should be truly representative of the needs facing all of Douglas County and should always be looking ways to effectively address those gaps in services. And that we also need to be looking at the representation of our local boards and commissions and steering committees, such as, you know, the Plan 2040. There's a lot of really great ideas, and I'm excited about the work that was done there, but I also can't help but notice that the steering committee is made up of all white people, and I don't believe that there are some rural voices represented there, but I'm not sure that there are many voices of color or voices from other underserved populations in our community, and that needs to be addressed across the board in our county administration.
Thank you. Nancy Thelman.
So Douglas County is really a fortunate county in that we can even ask this question, that we have both rural and urban parts to our county. Having both makes our lives better, both for enjoyment, but also for how these different kinds of locations actually physically function in our lives. So really it comes down to infrastructure, whether it's human-made infrastructure or nature-made infrastructure. Both are incredibly important. In an urban setting, it means density of people and infrastructure needed to support those people with high levels of services. It is efficient and cost-effective and spread across a large population, whereas rural settings are the opposite, with low density, few people, little infrastructure, and limited services. And people make the choice whether to live in a rural setting or an urban setting, but that choice is more complicated now as people push out and try to settle in the rural part of the county, because we now know that rural land has another job to do besides housing. It is natural and inexpensive, fantastic infrastructure. It supplies space for our local food system, our farmers, our local food, our local economy. It is where we can have the most impact on mitigating climate change through the way we farm and treat our soil and have massive forested tree canopies. It's where we can manage flood events without building structures. We can manage enormous flood events in the natural floodplain and wetlands. And it's also a public space for equitable, healthy outdoor recreation. And so it's just valuable in so many ways. Our rural lands are our real treasure and a gem, and we need to think of them in that special way, these days especially.
Thank you. The question is, how would you balance the rural needs of Douglas County with urban needs? District 3, we'll start with Shannon Portillo.
Thank you. I think this is an incredibly important question. As Sarah pointed out, currently 70% of our county lives within the city of Lawrence, which means we have 30% of our county spread between smaller municipalities, townships, and the unincorporated area. As a commission, it's important that we represent all of Douglas County. We tend to equate the term rural with whiteness, but that isn't necessarily the case. The rural areas of our state and our county are increasingly diverse. I want to ensure that we see representation on our county boards and commission. I want to ensure that we have appointments that truly represent our community. Our current commission has disproportionate rural and white representation. We must use our votes to ensure that we have representation on the commission in positions of political power, and it's the obligation of the commissioners to ensure that we have representative appointments on commissions and boards throughout the community. As commissioners, we also need to be accessible to our constituents. While I haven't been elected yet, I've already had folks in Pleasant Grove reach out and ask questions about how our county government functions. What is the role of public works versus the role of other county departments? As an educator, I'm uniquely skilled in helping folks engage and be heard in new spaces, and I'll use those skills throughout our county. As a commission, we also need to focus on how we collaborate, working with all municipalities and townships in Douglas County. This means that we must consider our formal agreements, and we must consider who we're bringing to the table when we have these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Willey.
So I keep a foot firmly in both worlds, in the city of Lawrence and in rural Douglas County. I lived many years in the city of Lawrence before starting a farm in southern Douglas County. I'm connected through family and through our school to Lawrence. I'm connected through our neighbors and my fire department to the townships. So all of the decisions that I make balance the urban and rural needs. The County Commission has some tough conversations coming up with its cities about growth, annexation, and land use. And there's some key issues involved with that, including affordable housing and prairie preservation. And those need to happen with urban and rural voices both, not in conflict, but in parts of a whole. For another example, with climate mitigation, maybe more on the minds of people in town, but our most powerful local solutions can happen on our rural land and tie into boosting our farm economy and local food for urban customers. The county provides basic services for roads, public health and safety, but people in cities expect better services and pay for them, better roads, faster fire and medical response. But figuring out who pays for what has been a source of conflict specifically between Lawrence and the county. When it comes to taxation, we need urban and rural voices both in negotiating those agreements in order to have the legitimacy that they need to move forward. Equity, economics, and environmental concerns affect both urban and rural people, but we do sometimes use different language to talk about them. And I'm in a good position to be a translator between the two.
Thank you. Next, we have Pam Mcdermott.
So I've been listening and learning about more intentionally about the rural needs and the urban needs of Douglas County for all of about 5 weeks. But I have lived here for 37 years, and I've been aware of this tension, over the years. So again, I think that a win-win should always be the goal, and that kind of, as Shannon Reed said, I think, we all rise and fall together. We're very much connected, the needs of the county and the urban and the rural. So when I've looked at this whole 2040 plan and just talked to people who probably know a lot more about it than me, the feedback that I've heard is that it really artificially constrains our growth, something I would be against, and that it has the effect of driving up the cost of real estate, which negatively affects affordable housing. And that's something that our county, our city, we've been committed to for years and worked on that. So when you have less affordable housing, then it's more difficult to attract employees who can live in the community. It has a whole set of side effects. So just recently, my daughter and son-in-law, who are in their mid to late 20s, tried to buy a house under $200,000 and were outbid several times. And what that said to me was that there's a need for that. And all families that live in Lawrence should be able to afford a home, and that's something a home provides stability, investment, opportunity to reach out to other people, and everyone should have access to that.
Thank you. Question 4. What would be your priorities for setting the county budget, how it is planned, and what could be improved? District 3, we'll start with Pam Mcdermott.
Okay, so I would say that we probably don't really know yet what the priorities will be for the budget for next year. We're going to have to be willing to adapt and make adjustments just based on what the future needs may be. The well-being of the common good, I think, should set the priorities, and a budget is a reflection of the things that we are important to us and that we want to prioritize. I did read the Lawrence survey recently that it was interesting to see what close to 1,000 people in Lawrence had prioritized as important to them: infrastructure, services that we all use and need. And I actually think that that's like the first role of government, safety and those kinds of things. So budgets have flexibility and they have to adapt to things as we go along. And so I just think, again, it's going to be why we need to have this unity that, I mentioned at the beginning. Like, we're all going to have to work together. I was so impressed during the pandemic back in April, just how, the nonprofits and other, like Lady Bird Diner and, entities in our community came together to provide services, and that we want to empower people that are creative and entrepreneurial in our community to solve some of the problems that we might face in the next year or two. I think Family Promise is another excellent model of how, even though they weren't able to have their normal fundraisers, they actually raised more.
Thank you. Next, we have Shannon Portillo.
Budgets are certainly value documents. I've served on the board of directors for the Willey Domestic Violence Center for the past 5 years. We have an annual operating budget of over $1.5 million. And every month as a board, we review our finances. But a few years ago, we started a practice at our monthly board meetings of telling the story of a single line item in the budget. That line item may be our rural outreach or professional development for our staff or transitional housing for survivors. But it's a way for us to discuss the numbers and connect them to our mission and our role in the community. Budgets at their core are values documents. When I look at the overall budget of the Willow, I'm really proud of the story that it tells. I think we need to get to the same place with our county budget. I'll work to make sure that our budget and policies are in line with the goals and values of our community. Again, I'll bring my values of accountability, community, and justice. I'll listen to our community. Our community has made clear that we don't want to invest in mass incarceration, but we do want to invest in social services. As a county, we also have to consider how we collaborate with municipalities and townships. There are currently over 40 agreements with the City of Lawrence between Douglas County and the city that predate our current city administrator and county administrator. It's going to be important for the next commission to consider how we work with local governments. I'll bring my 15 years of experience, including experience as a budgeting scholar who's published in peer-reviewed journals about budgeting, and how we work through these collaborations and how we make sure that our budget supports our values.
Thank you. Next, we have Karen Willey.
So we know the CARES money, the 24.9 million will all be spent before we get to office. And the 2021 budget will finalize next month with a flat mill levy and no raises for county employees. So the 2022 budget will be the first one to come to us. And by that time, we'll have a good idea of what hand the recession is dealing us. I'm anticipating tough choices, but first let me talk about where I'd like to spend money and then where it might come from. So the top is keeping strong safety net services to break cycles of poverty and economic development to create jobs. I'm committed to the operating costs for the new mental health campus and to growing our drug court and our behavioral health court programs. If possible, I'd like to explore countywide needs for broadband internet service. What would it take to even out our access for education, telehealth, and working from home countywide? I want to explore the options for a public defender's office as an additional safeguard against bias in our justice system. And I'd like to get us back on track as soon as practical with county salaries so we can keep our good people. Okay, where to get the money? Likely we will nickel and dime it out of the whole budget, which is hard and takes time. But specifically, we can identify efficiencies where technology could save us staff time. We'll have to put any remodel or space needs work on hold unless it's for personal safety. And though we'll open up the entire budget, with a new sheriff, there'll be an opportunity for some specific attention to look at his budget. Though in that, I won't compromise the safety of our jail, the effectiveness of our reentry programs, or rural patrol.
Thank you. The question is, what would be your priorities for setting the county budget, how it is planned, and what could be improved? District 2, Sarah Talafero.
Yes, I would like to see Douglas County change to developing a strategic plan as a start and taking this time that we will gain in the next year because of the CARES funding and because we have a cushion with the 9 million cash on hand and some other things that will allow us to get through the next year. The model of, I'd really like to see the county move to using that strategic plan that they develop now in a priority-based budgeting process that looks a little bit different than the conventional process used now. This is the model that progressive counties and municipalities use elsewhere to good advantage. Working with the county commission and county staff, I also want to develop a public participatory process that is more transparent so people can play a more direct role in the budget deliberations for Douglas County. I'd like also to mention that the county plays an often overlooked role in the economic stability of the people who live here and had before the pandemic. The mill tax levy rates in Douglas County have increased around 42% in the last decade. This is higher than most of the other counties with urban cities. Even if no further increases come this year, which we are assured they won't, property valuations continue to increase. Property taxes impact landlords who are currently providing affordable housing on the open market or through Section 8 or other publicly subsidized housing mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon Reed.
So when I think about the budget, I absolutely think about it as a values document and how money is power in our local systems, and where we spend that money is really indicative of what we value and what we are centering in our leadership of the community. So I'm interested in more money being allocated to more people-centered services that support the safety and health of our community at large. I'm interested in redistribution of funds, and when looking at a budget that allocates approximately 50% of our revenue to public safety, which includes some very necessary services and infrastructure for the safety of our community at large, but that also does support that funds law enforcement and our local jail, and those are parts of a system that I am interested in changing in our community and redistributing some of the funds from that to more people-centered services that provide affordable housing, more food security, more access with continuity to behavioral health and mental health services to help people maintain safe and stable lives in our community, which keeps them out of our legal system. And I think there's also a lot more continuity to be had in our budget process with how it matches up with the state and other local municipality budget timelines and processes. And so I'm interested in looking at that. And I also agree with Shannon that the 40 agreements between us and the city of Lawrence have to be looked at again because there's new leadership in place. And so now is the time to revisit those.
Thank you. Nancy Thelman.
So as someone who just sat through a complicated budgeting process, especially in this time of COVID and economic uncertainty, I can tell you that the budget priority this year was for a flat mill levy and for a stable county employee base and for as much consistency and provision of services as we can afford to do for the next 21-22 budget seasons. So I would say that my priority is to just be ever so conscious of the struggles of the taxpayers during this COVID economy and a recession with unemployment and all of the difficulty that brings. And as part of that, I would say that the county has, as a strong value, a strong sense of its responsibility to help fund social services and our social safety net. It's actually the second largest category of spending in the county budget. We spend about $17 million a year, and that's up substantially. In 2016, we added since 16, we've added another $7 million or so towards safety net services. So I would really like to spend a year studying our social safety net services and see where we can find efficiencies, see where we have racial inequity and social inequity coming through. And I'd like for us to hire a social service coordinator to oversee those efforts and make sure that we spend our money well, every penny of it, where it needs to go, especially in this COVID economy where people are struggling so hard and where we don't want to raise taxes, but we want every dollar we have to be used very, very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have closing statements. We'll start with District 2, Nancy Thelman.
So most of you know that I'm a Lawrence native. I'm a graduate of KU with a degree in nursing and a graduate of Vanderbilt with a degree in ministry. And I've lived in Grant Township, raising my family with my husband, Scott, for 20 years on a small family farm. I've been a county commissioner for 12 years now, and I've been really proud to make that my full-time job for all 12 of those years. I've been responsible for a number of initiatives for the county that I think are very important, including opening up the sustainability office, starting the first food policy council in the state, starting the e-community program. I talked about that earlier, that helps provide gap funding for new businesses in our small towns. Starting the Heritage Conservation Council that invests money in our unique lands and places. I'm the lead commissioner on the behavioral health initiatives that the county's undertaken in the last 5 years, and the lead commissioner on the construction of the behavioral health campus. And I'm happy to say we'll have the groundbreaking on that crisis center in October of this year. I'm also the lead commissioner on our open space initiative, hoping to bring an open space plan and funding to the county in the next few years. And I've helped with the most recent efforts at criminal justice reform, especially as COVID has changed the landscape of that entire effort. So I think in this particular time of layer upon layer upon layer of crisis, with COVID and recession and unemployment and uncertainty in our homes and in our businesses, in our universities and in our public schools, in any place where people gather, we now have great uncertainty and a sense of kind of a wounded psyche, really, in terms of what our future looks like. So I bring to that scenario a great deal of actual experience, not theoretical experience, in local governing. I know how to budget, I know how to be nimble in a crisis, and I know how to plan strategically for the future with an eye for the next generation. And so that's why I'd like, I hope to have another term to help us get through this peculiar season we're in and to find ourselves on strong and better footing for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sarah Talafero.
Lawrence and Douglas County have been my home for most of my life, and my family has lived in the Midwest for generations. I'm proud to continue my family legacy of service to the people and place that I so deeply feel connected to. For over 25 years now, I've been deeply engaged with community causes here in Douglas County, including homelessness, mental health care, and affordable housing. I have been able, through those experiences, to work with large networks of people, bringing them together for identification of problems and problem solving and action. I have been very disappointed in the lack of leadership recently shown by the current county commission. As Harry Truman puts it, for me, the buck stops here, and that will be my guiding philosophy for decision making. I feel that my drive for positive change, balanced by my maturity, experience, and leadership, is what will make me a great county commissioner. This year in particular has been a crazy year, and now we are living in time of great unknowns and few assurances. Douglas County is facing multiple crises that include growing needs for mental health support, greater instability of families, children, and individuals, and economic hardship. The pandemic has only exacerbated issues that already existed, and now we have reached a critical tipping point for our county. I'm running for county commissioner because I want to ensure that commission decisions do not place greater economic burdens on families at a time when they can least bear it. I care as much for the causes of others as I do my own, and I'm ready to inspire a collective sense of purpose and let the community in on defining the actions and compromises we need to see in order to make systemic change and be a just and fair community for all. Please vote for me for County Commissioner for District 2, and thank you for making this forum possible.
Thank you. Next is Shannon Reed.
As I've successfully done my whole life, I look forward to yet another opportunity to deepen my knowledge of local systems through boots on the ground work experience upon being elected as your District 2 County Commissioner. I intend to be a leader who actively listens, makes a point to amplify your voices in rooms with other decision makers, and who expects to answer to you with transparency and humility along the way. I want to help refocus our local government's capacity for creating a more positive impact in the lives of Douglas County residents, most especially the vulnerable, marginalized, and oppressed residents of our county. It is beyond time for us to pivot to a path focused on the collective well-being of our community. And in order to do that, we have to center the needs of those who have been left out and ignored for too long. I'm confident that we can create real change, which is rooted in justice and safety for people by making bigger investments in our social service and behavioral health services. I want to see that number go up, and I think it's possible. By helping to strengthen the sustainability of our local food systems, our local economies, and through the support of Douglas County farmers and local business owners that create, and our social services that can together find creative solutions for creating more affordable housing across all municipalities, townships, and rural districts, and by choosing different paths to implement real evidence-based alternatives to incarceration once and for all in this community. We need to refocus our priorities swiftly, and I know it's possible if we listen to what the people tell us they need from their elected officials. That's what I'm here for, to be open-hearted and to listen to you. I invite you all to reach out to me if you'd like to connect for more discussion. You can find me online through social media. I'm also happy to meet you with a mask and at a safe distance wherever you're at. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to all Douglas County residents for doing the work to make informed decisions about candidates you wish to elect. You have until Tuesday to request your mail-in ballot and until August 4th to cast your ballot, and remember, vote for Shannon.
Thank you. We're currently having closing remarks. District 3, Karen Willey.
So the County Commission isn't a job that happens on Wednesday nights. The formal meetings are just where we act on what we hear out in the community. So many people will never come and speak in a meeting, and sometimes those are the people we most need to hear from. So it's our job to go to them, going to community meetings, meeting for coffee, talking one-on-one, and then bringing that back to the public forum. That's the job. So I have the time and the desire to be available to the community, and I bring so many connections already through my years of volunteer service. In my 4 years on the Douglas County Planning Commission and 1 year as chair, I helped write our new comprehensive plan, which was the first document talking about environmental justice. We reworked our rural zoning regulations to be able to have the tools to protect farmland and native spaces. And I've been part of making initial progress on affordable housing in Lawrence, though there's so much more to do. I know it takes what it takes to craft big policy and also to have the humility to keep it open for change. I have nearly 25 years of experience working on budgets for nonprofits and also for my own businesses. The budget is a powerful tool, and I am prepared to dive into it in detail. I'm committed to having conversations about race, where I listen and learn about the experiences of people of color, and also with white people throughout the community to keep our communication open about bias and apply that to our work in the justice system. I'm a trained scientist with a PhD in geography, and with my practical work in sustainable farming, I'm committed to protecting and restoring the natural environment for the benefit of my own daughter and our next generation. 7 years as a volunteer firefighter mean I'm willing to put the good of other people above myself, and frankly, that's good training for serving as an elected official. I'm uniquely qualified to lead the county on issues of equity, economics, and environment. Spending time connecting with the community, especially with people who have been left out, providing close oversight to a tight budget, and making tough choices for the good of the next generation. I'm a problem solver, I'm a consensus builder, and I'm ready to lead on day one. Thank you for listening, and I'd be glad for your vote.
Thank you. Next we have Shannon Portillo.
Thank you for organizing this forum. While I'm saddened that we weren't able to be together in person, I'm thrilled that technology is providing an accessible and safe way for us to gather this afternoon. I look forward to serving my community as County Commissioner from District 3 and the first woman of color elected to our County Commission. I'll bring my 15+ years of experience on research and thought leadership on local government to this position. I'll also bring my experience as a community leader and local nonprofit board member. I have experience not only studying budgets, but also overseeing them and doing the real work of ensuring that our policies match our budget choices. I'm excited to work with our well-educated professional staff to implement policies that reflect our community values. I'll focus on 3 central values: accountability, community, and justice. Democracies work best when we're inclusive, representative, and accountable to voters. I'll listen to voters and work towards criminal justice reform. My work on the Governor's Commission on Racial Equity and Justice positions me well to consider how we leverage changes at the state level and push for more justice in our local community. I've spent over a decade and a half studying criminal justice systems, and we can do better. There are alternatives to incarceration, and there are better investments that we can make in our community. As we focus on recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to consider what kind of community we truly want to be. I'd like to invest in our community by focusing on social services and weaning off our reliance on a high sales tax. I'll work with our well-trained professional staff at the county level to ensure that policies are the ones that support our community. I'll ensure that boards and committee appointments reflect the diversity of our community. Please ensure that your voice is heard by requesting your mail-in ballot by Tuesday and having your voice heard by the August 4th primary. It's time for change in our community. Regardless of district, ensure that you vote for a Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Pam Mcdermott.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to share a little bit in closing about myself for those I've not ever held public office or anything like that, but I came to KU in 1983 from Massachusetts, graduated from KU with a degree in French, something that my dad helped me decide on, but I, just in 1989 married my husband. We've been married 30 years. We have 5 adult kids aged 21 to 29. We have 4 grandkids. And recently we decided to become foster parents again. And so for the last few years, we've had a handful of teenagers in our home. And, I care very much about what keeps families stable and together. So I've spent the last 30 years, I would say, working at the ground level of being involved in our community at that level with people in all parts of our community, and haven't spent a whole lot of time on any boards, but I think that can actually be a good thing for right now, because I think fresh eyes can be a helpful thing sometimes. And in my job, what I've done at Morning Star Church, that's a community that we started back in 1992, and I've had to lead volunteers, which has to be done by casting vision and by equipping and collaborating and building unity in that way, and having fun along the way too. So I operate by what is commonly known as servant leadership, which operates by the principles of listening rather than talking, and by empathy and by self-awareness and by persuasion rather than leading from like positional authority, and vision. And so it values people and empowers them to be participants. So I think we have a lot of things on the table in this season, and we have an opportunity to make it a moment of useful change. And I look forward to truly collaborating with the people here, because I think that they are the heroes of the story, the people in our community.
Thank you. In closing, I would like to thank our candidates for being in our forum today. It was very informative. District 2, Shannon Reed, Sarah Talafero, Nancy Thelman, Karen Willey, Shannon Portillo, and Pam Mcdermott. Thank you all for being on our forum. It is the hope of the Lawrence Branch NAACP that the forums were informative and helped you be able to make an informed decision for who you vote for. Thank you for attending. Ursula Miner, President, Lawrence Branch NAACP.
Thank you.
Thank you.